What's happening? Welcome to an episode of the Go Grab That Day podcast. Welcome to the Irish weather update. It's raining. Thank you. Goodbye. Tune in tomorrow for another update. That has to be the easiest job in the world, doing the weather for Ireland, because it's raining all the time.
Don't make unnecessary journeys. Don't take risks on treacherous roads. And don't swim in the sea.
How's things, folks? Hope you're all keeping well. Decided I'd do a little video here, seeing as it's been a little while. Quick and short, nice and easy, nothing too painful. So, get straight into it. Last week, for those of you who are big MMA fans like myself, I think it was last week. Yeah, around last week, the news was made official that the one, the only, the King of Rio, Jose Aldo, has decided to hang up the gloves at long last. And I could not, as a fan of the sport and as a big fan of him, not discuss it or not do a video on it. So as I said, we'll make it short and sweet, but this is just to pay respect to one of those great fighters that made the sport what it is. Someone who doesn't get nearly enough respect, in my humble opinion. So I just want to discuss it a little bit. I've been a fan of Jose Aldo for a long time. I'm quite happy to see him hang up the gloves. He still had plenty in him, to be honest. And we'll go through the record shortly. Still had plenty of fight in him, but I just think he's done enough. I don't think he's going to make another run at the belt, and he's never going to be what he was. There's not many who are going to be what he was. So yeah, time to hang them up. Quite happy. Hopefully he's made his money. People who are new fans to the sport that haven't got to kind of see how much of a terror that man was to the featherweight division in WEC before he came to the UFC, and when he came to the UFC, the man was phenomenal, unbelievable. He was just ferocious, so well rounded. His striking was insane. And I mean, when you run through his record here, considering, like, you kind of forget, because he has not been who he was, you realise the man, like, even look at when you run through his full list here, just to go from top to bottom, as I said, he's been kind of remembered, not by real fans who've been around the sport a lot, but newer fans to the sport, the ones that think Conor McGregor is the best fighter ever. You people. So kind of because of that loss to McGregor, people didn't really, I believe some people didn't respect him as much as they should have. But you look at his career, so from going to there was a lot of different organisations here, like WEC is the one I'd recognise, but then the ones where before he got to kind of the big organisations, Eco Fight, Shooto Brazil, Rio MMA, Mecca World, Vale Tudo. Like, Aldo fought in organisations where there was barely any rules. There was soccer kicks to the head. There is a great, what's the word I would use? Kind of a highlight video, of Aldo. I can't remember who did it, but it's one I always go back to and watch. I think it's just called Jose Aldo Scarface, and it's just got all these clips put together. It's in the build up to the Conor McGregor fight, and it's just all the build up of all these fights, and you see how ferocious he was. There's ones where he's soccer kicking guys in the head, and he was vicious. And you got to remember, like, how good he also was on the ground. Aldo was a very good black belt. His defensive wrestling was class. Even if you see in his last fight against Merab Dvalishvili, who nobody wanted to fight, not just because his name is so hard to pronounce, but nobody in the bantamweight division wanted to go near Dvalishvili because he was such a fucker when it comes to his wrestling and his cardio. I've tipped him to eventually be champion, because he's just such a nightmare for people. Nobody wanted him, and Aldo took it, which is crazy. But anyway, as I said, running through the record, like, you've got, when he went pro, he went on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fight win streak. One loss, then he went on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 fight win streak. That's fucking nuts. That's going from May 2006 to October 2014. And then that was before he lost to Conor McGregor. That's fucking insane. But look at the people he's beat. All the big names, even going back to, say, before the UFC, he fought the likes of Mike Brown, Jonathan Brookins, Cub Swanson, Uriah Faber. I mean, where he demolished. If anyone hasn't seen that, go back and watch Jose Aldo, versus Uriah Faber. He chewed up Uriah Faber's legs. One of the nastiest leg kickers ever. He destroyed Faber's legs. There's a video, most people would have seen it, of Faber the day or two after the fight, and his leg looks like it looked like it got run over by a truck. It's swollen, it's huge, it's red, it's just from Aldo's leg kicks. Vicious dude. Beat Manny Gamburian, Kenny Florian, Chad Mendes, Frankie Edgar, Chan Sung Young, Ricardo Lamas, Chad Mendes again. I mean, then of course he had his loss to Conor McGregor. Then at UFC 200 he beat Frankie Edgar a second time. You gotta remember how good Frankie Edgar was too. And in that one, if I'm not wrong, he beat the piss out of Frankie Edgar in the UFC 200. I believe it was just a complete one-sided mauling. Had his losses then to Max Holloway both, and then he goes on to beat Jeremy Stevens, beat Renato Moicano, lost to Volkanovski, lost to Moraes, lost to Peter Yan. That's the 3-fight skit. Then he beats Marlon Vera, beats Pedro Munoz, and beats Rob Font. They're fucking big names, like Marlon Vera is now the guy who's tipped to go on and be champion of the bantamweight division. Well, whatever way you look at it, like he's tipped as one of the up-and-comers or one of the next guys in line. I mean, and then his last fight, of course, was his loss to Merab Dvalishvili. So there's serious names to have on his record, wins or losses. Just a legend in the sport. I will miss fighters like him. As I said, a big fan. He wasn't a shit talker. One of my favourite things, I don't know why I always liked it, was when he used to face off. He would never look at the opponent. Aldo would stand, say in his corner, stand in his corner, head down, would never look at the opponent. When they would face off, the ref would bring them in, never look at the opponent. He'd touch gloves or whatever, would never look. And then he would look when the fight started. I don't know why he did that, but I always liked it. It just ruled out all of that kind of needing to face off, to stare down, which realistically, even though they're cool to watch and I like it sometimes, does it really mean a lot when it comes to the fight? I mean, you're considering, Aldo didn't bother his ass looking at anybody. He still beat the shit out of people. Just a great fighter. Hope he's made all the money in the world. Trying to kind of think of, I suppose, favourite moments for me. There was one I never forget, actually. I'm not sure was it he fought Chad Mendes twice. Two great fights. Mendes, to be fair to Chad Mendes, he put it up to him in both fights. But there was one, again, I can't remember if it was the first or the second. I believe it was the first, where he knocks Chad Mendes out with a knee. Aldo holds Mendes' gloves as he turns, holds his hands as he turns, throws the knee. So he couldn't defend the knee as Aldo turned to throw the knee. It's just a real smart kind of veteran move. And they were great fights. Mendes really put it up to Aldo, and Aldo was still able from. It's just, what a legend. The undisputed King of Rio. I'll never forget some of his fights, and legend. There's so many legends on the sport, moving on, and it's, I don't want to say sad to see, but it's just guys who I've spent a long time watching, like Nate Diaz recently left the UFC, which I think, if anything, it was late. I would like to have seen him go a little earlier, but another legend. There's a lot of guys leaving the sport. Now, by no means has that hindered the sport. I actually believe the UFC in particular at the moment is at the highest level it's ever been, which is easy enough to say, but really, when you look at it, when you look at the spread across divisions, it's the highest it's ever been. And the likes of Jose Aldo could still mix it up in there. But just looking again, running through his accolades and things he's won, like he's won so many BJJ titles. I don't know now really what's a great title in BJJ and what's not, but he's won world tournaments, world events. You look at his record: 39 fights, 31 wins with 8 losses. 17 knockouts. Fucking insanity. What a record the man had. And to think then later in his career, Aldo was always known as someone who struggled to make weight at featherweight, 145. You know, he was, they say that was his issue. He struggled to make weight and sometimes could tire. And then considering later in his career, he made changes. Went down to bantamweight. Now, I don't know what his first fight was at bantamweight. Was it Moraes, maybe? Yeah, Marlon Moraes, which was a loss. Yeah, I remember that. Actually, I thought he won that fight, to be honest. If I remember correctly, split decision. Yeah, I thought he had won that fight. But he went down, completely changed his body, you know, reduced some of his muscle, and you could see it in him that he took it serious, that his fitness was there. You really got to see it kind of, you know, Peter Yan fight, okay, he lost, but then went on, and you got to see it in the next 3 fights. You know, as I said, Marlon Vera, Pedro Munoz, Rob Font, they're big fucking names for Aldo to go out and beat. Albeit all by unanimous decision, but I remember him looking great. In particular in the Munoz fight, I thought he looked very good. As I said, a legend of the sport, undisputed King of Rio. Hopefully he'll go on and do some, I don't know, whether it'll be coaching or might do a bit of boxing. I'm sure that there's that avenue too, but a legend. And I hope people out there who are fans of the sport can go and appreciate how good he was. You know, don't be fooled by the hype of McGregor and think that, you know, Aldo is some sort of a punk. Great fighter, an absolute legend, and without a doubt, the greatest featherweight ever in the UFC. I mean, when you hear the likes of, even say Conor McGregor, who had so much shit to say about Aldo, but then went on to pay a lot of respect to him in his later fights, and then you hear, you know, Volkanovski and Max Holloway, who both while they were champions, have said they feel that Aldo is the greatest featherweight ever. Not many people can ever do that. It's very rare you see fighters with such a respect on their name. You know, when you consider guys who have beaten you, have taken the belt, you know, are now Volkanovski being the current champion, and I tend to agree with that. I do think he's the best ever. I think the run he went on, the people he beat, you know, everybody wants to be double champion. Now it's rare that you see guys actually run through a division like he has done. I'll finish on a quick funny story I'd heard during the week. It's good to see this side of Aldo. Now this was subtitled, it was on a podcast, I presume in Brazil somewhere, when he was talking about when he, in the build-up to Conor McGregor, and, you know, he had his regrets, saying that he wished he got the rematch, which I don't know, that was a tough fight for McGregor if he got the rematch. But yeah, so Aldo was saying how, you know, he found McGregor crazy. You know, obviously there's a lot of disrespect there, but he paid his respects to him. But he was talking about how, you know, he felt that McGregor was drinking all the time because they would randomly get calls to Aldo's private jet from a drunk McGregor insulting them. And in the podcast, he laughed at it, and he found it funny, and it was just good to see that side of him where he can kind of go back and look at his career, and, you know, what a legend, what an absolute legend. And again, I'll finish with undisputed featherweight king, undisputed King of Rio, the legend that is Jose Aldo. Peace.